Hey there. Thanks for stopping by. Before we dive into today's story, let me know where you're watching from and how this video makes you feel. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Used to believe that love, when it was real, felt like peace, like walking into a room and knowing exactly where you belong. That's what it felt like with Damien Vale. For 3 years, he was my center. Steady, magnetic, endlessly confident. The kind of man who could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with everyone's attention. To the outside world, Damien was a success story. He owned a chain of boutique wine bars across the Carolinas, had a sharp smile and a sharper suit, and always knew the right thing to say. But to me, he was more than just charming. He was the man who rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep, who whispered promises into my hair during thunderstorms, who once drove 2 hours just to bring me my favorite cookies after a terrible workday. His love felt solid, unshakable. So when he planned a weekend away at a secluded lake house just outside Asheville, I thought nothing of it, just Damien being romantic again, carving out time for us before the whirlwind of the wedding took over. But something in him had shifted. It started subtly, canceling our cake tasting, pushing off conversations about our vows. Then came the missed calls, the silent dinners, the way he avoided looking at me when I talked about our future. I told myself it was nerves or stress. I even told myself I was being dramatic. Until that night. The lake house was beautiful. Warm wood, big windows, a fire crackling in the stone hearth. Damien made dinner, pan-seared scallops, his signature dish, and poured me a glass of wine with a quiet smile. I wanted to believe this was his way of resetting, of reassuring me. Instead, after we finished eating, he stood, walked over to his leather duffel, and pulled out a folder. "There's just one thing we should square away," he said, setting the folder on the table between us. His voice was light, casual, like he was offering me dessert. I blinked. "What's this?" He gestured toward the folder and sat back down. "Just a prenup, standard stuff." My heart skipped. Not because I was opposed to the idea, but because of how suddenly, how clinically he brought it up. "You never mentioned wanting one," I said. He shrugged. "Didn't want to make a big deal out of it. My mom's attorney helped draft it." His mom, Lydia Vale. I'd met her twice. Both times, she'd looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I opened the folder slowly, scanning the pages. At first, everything looked reasonable, until I got to the last few sections. It wasn't just a prenup. It was a map to ruin. If the wedding didn't happen, I would owe his family for every expense they'd incurred. Venue deposits, catering, even the cost of the engagement ring. If we divorced, I'd walk away with nothing. Not the apartment we shared, not a single dime of the savings account we both contributed to. I looked up, hoping this was some kind of test, a joke, but Damien was sipping his wine like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in front of me. "Is this serious?" He nodded. "It's just practical. You know how things are." I stared at him. "No, I don't." He leaned forward, his eyes calm. "It doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means we're smart." But it didn't feel smart. It felt like a trap. Like a document designed not to protect us, but to protect them. From me. I set the folder down with a shaking hand. He reached across the table, touching my fingers. "Babe, it's just paperwork. Let's not make it bigger than it is." But I couldn't unsee what I'd read. That night, as Damien slept beside me in the big cedar-framed bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my body frozen with the kind of stillness that only comes from knowing something has shifted so permanently. It can never go back. This wasn't a promise of forever. It was the beginning of something else, something I hadn't agreed to, and I wasn't sure I could survive it. The next morning, the sunlight crept in through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on the wooden floor. I was already awake, still lying next to Damien, pretending to sleep. His breathing was slow, steady, unbothered. Like nothing had changed, but everything had. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, careful not to wake him. My feet met the cold floor with a jolt, grounding me in a reality I wasn't ready to face. I made my way to the bathroom, closed the door, and finally allowed myself to breathe. The mirror didn't lie. My eyes were puffy, ringed with sleeplessness. I didn't cry, I couldn't. There was something more urgent brewing beneath the hurt. A need to understand, a need to figure out just how deep this betrayal went. I turned on the faucet and let the water run as I reached for my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed Lydia Vale's name, hoping to find something, anything, to explain this. What I found instead was a mention of another name, Sienna Carter. It was buried in a comment thread from 2 years ago, beneath an article about one of Damien's wine bar openings. A single line from an anonymous user. "Let's hope this one lasts longer than Sienna." My stomach dropped. I tapped the name into the search bar. The results came quickly. A few outdated social posts, an old engagement announcement, then nothing, just like she'd been erased. I leaned back against the wall, heart pounding. Another fiancée? Another woman Damien had almost married, and who then disappeared from his life completely? I stared at the phone, numb. Was I just next in line? Another name to be swept under the rug if I didn't fall into place? I stepped out of the bathroom, the world suddenly too loud. Damien was in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another Saturday. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, babe. You sleep okay?" I lied. "Yeah, just needed a minute." He poured me a cup. I held it with both hands to keep them from shaking. The heat felt foreign. "I was thinking," he said, handing me a spoon, "we could spend the afternoon hiking that ridge we saw on the way in. Clear our heads." Clear our heads. Like nothing had happened. I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds nice. But in my mind, I was already somewhere else. Somewhere far from this cabin, this man, and the future I had once believed in. Because now I needed answers. I needed to know what happened to Sienna Carter, and I needed to know it fast. After breakfast, Damien suggested a walk by the lake. The sun was high, the breeze cool, and the water shimmered like glass. To anyone watching us, we probably looked like any happy couple enjoying a weekend getaway. But I felt like a marionette, strings pulled tight, smiling because I had to. He held my hand like he always did, but his touch no longer warmed me. It chilled me. Because now I knew there were parts of his past he had erased, and maybe people too. That night, after Damien fell asleep, I slipped out of bed. I tiptoed across the room to where he'd left his bag. My breath caught as I unzipped it, hands shaking, heart pounding like a war drum. Inside, nestled between clothes and chargers, was his laptop. I opened it. Screen glow lit up my face in the dark room. I entered the password. It worked. His inbox was the first thing I checked. I didn't have to scroll far. A recent email, marked with a red flag, caught my eye. It was from Lydia's attorney. "All clauses are intact. Should she decide to walk, the penalties will ensure she can't do so quietly." I swallowed hard. My palms were damp. My heart knocked against my ribs. There was another thread with Damien and someone listed as V. Langford. "We handled Sienna, just make sure Riley signs." Handled. The word hit me like a slap. My name next to hers made my stomach turn. I clicked open an older file, a document outlining media protocols, family statements, and a contingency plan. This wasn't just a prenup, it was a machine, a system. And I was a name in a long line of women who'd been processed, pushed out, or possibly worse. I shut the laptop. My reflection in the window stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to the only person who'd believe me without asking 1,000 questions. "Ava, I'm not safe. Can you come? Don't call. I'll explain later, please." No punctuation, just urgency. I waited for her reply every second 1,000 years. When it came, I almost cried. "I'm coming. Midnight. Back trail. Don't let him know." I stared at the screen, memorizing the words, and then slowly I climbed back into bed beside Damien, pretending again. Pretending to love the man who might be the reason someone like Sienna disappeared. Pretending I hadn't already started planning my escape. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sienna's name beside mine. Handled. What did that mean? What had they done to her? I lay beside Damien, breathing in rhythm with him, pretending to rest. But inside I was burning. Rage, fear, grief, all wrapped into a single smothering heat. If I stayed quiet, if I did nothing, I could be next. But if I moved too quickly, too obviously, it could all backfire. By sunrise, I had a plan. I waited for Damien to go on his morning run, a new routine he'd picked up a few months ago. And as soon as the door closed behind him, I sprang into motion. I packed a small bag, just the essentials. Nothing that would tip him off. No missing makeup, no empty drawers. I kept my phone tucked in my back pocket as I moved through the house, pausing every time the floor creaked beneath my feet. My hands trembled when I zipped the bag shut. Every sound felt too loud. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and opened my phone again. I needed to know more. Not just about Sienna, about them. About what happened the last time someone tried to leave. Ava had sent another message. "I'm 2 hours out. Bring only what you need. Parked at the back trail. We'll move fast." My thumbs hovered over the screen. Then I typed, "Thank you. Don't come to the front. He can't see you." I scrolled back through Damien's inbox screenshots I'd saved, rereading every chilling phrase. I needed to memorize them, in case I lost my phone, in case I lost more than that. At breakfast, I played my part. I wore the robe he liked. I smiled when he mentioned brunch plans. I let him kiss my cheek. Inside, I was ticking down the hours. When the afternoon came, we went for a walk around the lake. I let him take pictures of me, even posed when he asked. My smile felt like cardboard. My skin crawled every time his fingers grazed mine. We returned to the lake house just before sunset. Damien poured 2 glasses of wine. I pretended to sip mine. The taste turned my stomach. "You've been quiet today," he said casually. I gave a soft laugh. "Just tired. The air here is heavier than I thought." He nodded. "We'll head back tomorrow morning. Fresh start." I looked at him, forcing my eyes to soften. "Sounds good." That night, I changed into sweats, crawled under the blanket on the couch, and said I had a headache. He kissed my forehead and told me to get some rest. When the cabin went quiet, when the fire dwindled to embers, I waited. 10 minutes, 20, 45. Then I moved. I grabbed my bag, slipped on my coat, and crept to the back door. My breath hitched when a floorboard squeaked. I froze, waited. No sound from the bedroom. I opened the door slowly. The cold hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. I stepped out into the dark, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots, louder than it should have been. I didn't look back. I followed the trail behind the house, every step pulling me further away from Damien Vale, from the version of myself who once believed in his love. And when I saw Ava's car headlights cut through the trees, I nearly collapsed. She threw open the passenger door. "Get in," she said. And I did, without a single word, without a single tear. Because survival doesn't wait for sentiment. It demands action. The ride was quiet. Ava didn't ask questions, not at first. She just kept her eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel, as the lake house vanished in the rearview mirror. I stared out the window, letting the silence hold me. My heart still hadn't slowed. My hands were clenched in my lap, my phone gripped tight like a lifeline. Finally, Ava spoke. "You okay?" I shook my head. "No, but I will be." She didn't press. She just nodded. That's what I loved about her. She knew when to speak and when to just let you breathe. We drove for nearly an hour before stopping at a gas station. I used the restroom to splash cold water on my face and change into the spare clothes Ava had brought. Just leggings, a hoodie, and sneakers. Clothes I could move in. Clothes that didn't feel like his. Back in the car, I pulled out my phone and reopened the tabs I had saved. Sienna Carter? Engagement canceled. Disappeared. I tapped through links and threads, piecing together fragments, an old Instagram tagged with Damien's name, a news mention of a fundraiser she once attended with his mother, Lydia Vale. Then, the last thing, a missing persons flyer, posted by her sister. Madison Carter, I turned to Ava. "Do you think you could take me to Savannah?" She blinked. "That's 6 hours from here. What's in Savannah?" Her, Sienna's sister, Madison. She posted the missing flyer. Ava didn't hesitate. "Then that's where we're going." We left the interstate and pulled into a diner somewhere along the back roads. My hands shook as I sipped weak coffee. Ava kept watch while I scrolled through my notes and messages, compiling every detail. I was building a case. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman before me. Every woman who didn't have someone waiting at a trailhead in the dark. I picked up the napkin beside my plate and started writing names, dates, locations. Sienna Carter, engagement dissolved 2021. Lauren Wells, PR consultant, left after 6 months, non-disclosure enforced. Ava leaned over. "How many?" I looked up. "Too many." She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. "Then let's make sure you're the last." That night, we checked into a cheap motel off the highway. I kept my bag near the door, my phone fully charged, my shoes beside the bed, because even though I was gone, I didn't feel safe. Not yet. But I had something I didn't have before, direction. And maybe, just maybe, justice. Savannah was humid and heavy with late summer. The streets smelled like magnolias and sea salt, and the Spanish moss hung from trees like draped secrets. Ava and I pulled up to a bookstore tucked between a bakery and a vintage clothing shop. A wooden sign read, Carter & Co. Booksellers. Inside, it smelled like old pages and brewed coffee. A woman stood behind the counter, shelving new arrivals. Her dark curls were pulled into a low bun, and her eyes were sharp, observant, the same eyes I'd seen in photos beside Sienna's. Madison Carter. She looked up when we walked in, her expression unreadable. "Can I help you?" I stepped forward, heart in my throat. "My name's Riley. I knew your sister, a little, through Damien Vale." Her face didn't change, but the room did. Something shifted. She set the book down. "You'd better come to the back." We followed her through a curtain behind the counter and into a small office. The space was filled with half-unpacked boxes and framed photos. One of them was Sienna, mid-laugh, holding a glass of champagne. I sat. Ava stood behind me, silent but present. Madison didn't speak right away. She just looked at me, studied me. "Let me guess," she said. "Prenup. Conditions. Threats. You got scared." I swallowed. "I ran." "Good," she said. "You're lucky. My sister didn't." I felt the words settle like stones in my stomach. "What happened to her?" Madison leaned back in her chair. What always happens when money's more important than people. She signed the contract, thought it was love, thought she could navigate it. But they made it impossible, controlled every move, and when she tried to leave... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "There's no proof," Madison continued. "No trail. They're careful, powerful. But they underestimated one thing." "You," I whispered. She nodded. "And now, maybe you." We talked for an hour. She gave me copies of old documents, photos, messages Sienna had sent in secret. I recorded every detail in my phone, every piece of the puzzle. When we stood to leave, she looked me in the eyes. "Be careful, Riley. They clean things up fast. You're not safe just because you're out." "I know," I said, "but I'm not staying quiet." Outside, the air felt thicker, but my lungs were clearer. For the first time in days, I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting back. And I wasn't alone anymore. The drive back to the motel was silent. Not heavy, not tense. Just focused. Ava's knuckles were white around the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through the files Madison had given me, committing every name, date, and detail to memory. They weren't just careless. They were calculated. And for the first time, I had the receipts. Back in the room, Ava ordered takeout while I started drafting a plan. A real one. Not just survival, strategy. I opened a private document on my laptop and began typing everything I had. Names, patterns, how each woman entered Damien's life, how she disappeared, who was involved. I referenced the emails, the prenup language, the press statements that seemed harmless until you looked closer. They had a method, and now I had a map. That night, I couldn't sleep, not out of fear this time, but fire. The kind of burning that happens when you realize you have power and they didn't see you coming. By morning, I was on the phone with a journalist Ava trusted, a woman who had taken down corrupt developers and politicians in the past. Her name was Elise Monroe. I gave her just enough to get her interested, and we agreed to meet that afternoon in a cafe 2 towns over. When I told her everything, she didn't blink. "I'll look into it," she said. "But if what you're saying is true, it's going to take more than one story." "I'm not going away," I told her, "and I'm not the only one." She nodded. "Then let's begin." We spent 2 hours reviewing the documents. By the time I left, Elise already had her sleeves rolled up and her recorder running. I didn't know where the story would go. I didn't know if we could bring them down. But I knew this. I wasn't afraid anymore. A few days later, Damien texted me. "Hope you're okay. Let's talk." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He knew I was gone. But what he didn't know, what he would never see coming, was that this time, someone was going to talk back. This time, the story wouldn't end in silence. This time, I was writing the ending myself, and it wouldn't be quiet.